from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the program, Monday night edition. Happy to be here with you. 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And hope everybody had a good weekend. It was an action-packed one for me on Friday. You got a couple of really, really good interviews. And I also was in Brooklyn, New York on Friday, celebrating the 40th birthday of James O'Keefe, investigative filmmaker. You know him well. And that was a treat in and of itself. There's a lot going on there. I'll bring you up to speed on that a little bit later. Of course, the big story of today, the Supreme Court handed a major win to President Trump and really to America, where now they say that in their ruling, ex-presidents have substantial protection from prosecution. And this is an idea, right, a theory known as qualified immunity that most people in Washington have under the speech and debate clause of the Constitution. All members of Congress have it. The idea, the thought is that most police officers have it. Right? It's like a Good Samaritan law in many ways. There was a case, I don't know how many years ago, of a first responder that began doing CPR on someone, chest compressions, and brought someone back to life through those chest compressions, and that person then sued the first responder for breaking their ribs. Of course, most people would say, well, you know, you shouldn't get sued and you shouldn't be held criminally liable for trying to save someone's life because that is the greater good. That's the expectation, et cetera, et cetera. So in the same way, the Supreme Court has made their decision to protect that same immunity that presidents have. And this was a big deal, of course, Trump arguing this in all four of his cases, saying that he was immune from prosecution on a lot of things, that everything he was doing was in the capacity of his role as president of the United States. So the Supreme Court ruled today in Trump versus the United States that a former president, not necessarily him, but any former president, has substantial immunity from prosecution for official acts while committed in office, but not for unofficial acts. It was a 6-3 decision. The court sent the matter back down to a lower court as the justices did not apply the ruling to whether or not former President Trump is immune from prosecution regarding the issues related to the cases that are being brought against him. But those courts are going to have to figure out how the Supreme Court's ruling plays into it, obviously leaving the door open for interpretation to say, well, was what he was doing in his capacity as president or not? And, you know, yet another, I'm going to say, a punt from the Supreme Court, but still a major deal because they had to do that. And Trump made the case, and his attorneys did, and we played you that audio when we had it, when it happened. The brilliant point that if a president, i.e. Barack Obama, were to kill people, as he had in a drone strike, including an American, then would he be liable for criminal prosecution for doing that? And that is a big question. Are we going to start holding presidents accountable for the work that they do while they're presidents? Same thing with police or anybody else. And I think it makes sense. It doesn't mean you're all above the law, but it means, you know, if you're a cop and in the commission of your day-to-day duties, you have to discharge your weapon and maybe somebody is killed as a result of that, they're going to investigate. And if it's the case that this cop was reckless and decided to just go murdering people, then you do what you got to do and prosecute this person. But if it turns out that somebody pulled out a gun on them, let's say a teenage boy, like happened recently, they fire back. This is expected in their role and in the commission of their duties as officers. So what do you do? Put the guy in jail now? You say because you're not protected under doing your actual job? And of course, this makes all the sense in the world. I think if you have, a fair mind, you're going to say, sure, that makes sense. But this is not what the case was. Obviously, 6-3, the majority ruled here. But there was still a third of the court that dissented on this. Chief Justice Roberts writing for the majority, saying the president enjoys no immunity for his unofficial acts, and not everything the president does is official business. So I think that's where we want to know how it breaks down. But Roberts continued, saying the president is not above the law, but Congress may not criminalize the president's conduct in carrying out the responsibilities of the executive branch under the Constitution. And the system of separation of powers designed by the framers has always demanded an energetic, independent executive. Agreed. So they go on. The president, therefore, may not be prosecuted, any president, for exercising his core constitutional powers, and he is entitled, at a minimum, to a presumptive immunity from prosecution for all official acts. That immunity applies equally to all occupants of the Oval Office, regardless of politics, policy, or party. So, big deal. Big deal. El Trompito has a win here. What will happen? Well, Joe Biden decided to weigh in on this. And, of course, cable news is weighing in on this, and everybody's up in arms about it. And we're going to talk about it. We're going to break it down over the next couple of segments. Plus, we're going to get your calls on this matter. Probably in about 40 minutes, half hour. I'll be doing calls maybe around 10:50 p.m. Eastern time, 10:40 p.m. or so. So make sure you get those calls in if you want to join the conversation on that. The number, of course, 833-4825-337, 833-4-VALDEZ. If you're chiming in online, I'll try and check those during the break as well and share some of your thoughts at Rich Valdez with an S. And the question is, will Biden, now that he has responded to this, and in my opinion, kind of exacerbated the call for more lawfare, will this help him or hurt him? Does this put Biden in a better position or not? We'll be discussing that throughout the evening. Plus, we're also going to talk about PTSD as it relates to men and how it affects men differently. That's coming up in the second hour because that's the thing, right? It is, it was just a few days ago, National PTSD Awareness Day. And we wanted to talk about how that affects men specifically. And, of course, more politics and culture later on. So stick with me, folks. It's Rich Valdez. Happy to be back. I've got lots to discuss. I was at the beach today, by the way. I've got a little color. And I am looking forward to discussing that with you guys as well. A little bit of that. So don't go anywhere. Rich Valdez coming right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
By the way, your ratings are up. Congratulations.
Thank you,
somebody. It's always nice to check. I like to see, even if they're friends, I like to see how are they doing. Are people listening, right?
That's
but
right.
You're doing great.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
This nation was founded on the principle that there are no kings in America. Each of us is equal before the law. No one is above the law, not even the President of the United States. With today's Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity, that fundamentally changed. For all practical purposes, today's decision almost certainly means that there are virtually no limits on what a president can do. This is a fundamentally new principle, and it's a dangerous precedent, because the power of the office will no longer be constrained by the law, even including the Supreme Court of the United States. The only limits will be self-imposed by the president alone.
That, of course, is President Biden, who I like to call Joe El Baboso Biden, coming out swinging here saying that this is a dangerous precedent to say that while you're doing your job like he is, like when he struck the wrong people, right, as I understand it, I think it was the wrong people, after he got 13 U.S. service members killed in his botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. There was a retaliatory drone strike. And in that strike, he missed, right? He didn't get the right people, and these people died. So are we to say that now we're supposed to go after Joe Biden for murdering innocent people? Or is he immune from prosecution for that because this was done during the commission of his job as commander-in-chief? Now, of course, he's responding to the big decision today that came from the Supreme Court where they said that a president, any president in the Trump versus the United States case, any president is immune from prosecution if they're doing what they do within the role of their job. What the issue is of course, the left, the media, and all of Joe Biden's friends are going to say, well, this is not the role of your job, right? This is you operating outside the capacity of president of the United States, and now we got to throw the book at you. So lawyers are split on television, the cable news, talking heads, etc., those that like to come on radio. And they're saying they're not sure which way or the other this stuff is going because some say yes, some say no. Some say this is an overreach. Some say this is necessary. I tend to think this is absolutely necessary. I agree with the court's opinion, and I think it should have gone a little further. But be that as it may, I want to get to the bottom of it with somebody who's a former intelligence officer, a captain with the United States Army, as well as a prosecutor, a candidate for attorney general in the state of Arizona, and he's now a candidate for Congress in the 8th District of Arizona. Abe Hamadeh, welcome back.
Good to be with you, Rich.
So, Abe, you heard this clip from President Biden. He's blasting this, and it almost sounds like it's a call to arms for Jack Smith and the rest of his lawfare acolytes to continue to come at Trump. What say you?
Well, I think it's what we've seen is that he disregards the law all the time. When the Supreme Court said that the student loan forgiveness that he tried to doing was unconstitutional, what did he do? He said, I don't care.
Right.
I'm going to do it anyway. So this is Joe Biden's attempt at gaslighting the American people because he's realizing that the weaponization of the rule of law isn't going his way. And if you look at the Supreme Court's decision, it was actually pretty measured because they actually leave it up to the district court to decide whether this one instance regarding Trump is whether it's an official act or unofficial act. And I know the position of the Trump team is that it was an official act with the alternate slate of electors, for instance. So it's a very measured approach by the Supreme Court, and it's one that is obvious, like what you mentioned, which I'm glad you did, Rich, because people seem to forget that the retaliatory strike in Afghanistan after 13 service members tragically died, there was this rush to judgment that Joe Biden did, and he went and droned this innocent family that was taking pallets of water outside their car. And you're right. If under what Joe Biden was trying to say, then he would be liable for possible murder. But that's not what the Supreme Court did. It was an official act, and you did your best as your ability as president, given the intelligence, whether it was a failure of intelligence or not. So this is where you're going to see the rule of law is being destroyed right before our eyes, Rich. Clearly, at every turn, Joe Biden doesn't care. This is the Marxist takeover of our country. So they're already. I mean, if you look at Hillary Clinton's tweets, and you see the whole Democrats, Mark Elias. This is to them is existential. They're calling these Supreme Court justices MAGA, right? I mean, some of these were not even appointed under President Trump, and yet here they are coming to the same conclusion. But this is the MO of the Biden administration. They constantly lie to the American people, and the American people are seeing right through it.
Well, this is, I think, part and parcel of their message, right? The message is Trump is a threat to democracy, and democracy will be destroyed if you elect Trump, right? It's a double-sided coin. And if they don't label everything that disagrees with them, whether it's my speech, your speech, the Supreme Court's ruling, whatever it is, as an attack on democracy, then they lose their gravy train. Now, I appreciate your thought on this because I think you're right, and I'm just really wondering how does it play out, at least from your estimation, when this goes back to the lower court and they have to make choices. Do they now become politicized and in many of them can be and have been and are? So if that is the case and they decide, all right, no, we're going to continue with Jack Smith, we're going to continue with this, we're going to keep going here, does this just open the door for not only more lawfare, but just more litigation to kind of gridlock Trump?
Absolutely. And this is the one good thing about this case is, since the decision came out, it's going to be very unlikely that the district court is actually going to rule on this before the November election. So that's a good thing. But I think this could possibly linger while President Trump is still, when he gets elected, God willing, in office. And this district judge in D.C. is a leftist. And I'm pretty certain that they're going to take orders from the Biden administration, just like so many of these prosecutors have been. And they're going to try to deem it that it was an unofficial act of what President Trump did. And that's going to be their workaround. So that's how I'm viewing the situation. But then that's what's so important about having good, honest, independent judges. And unfortunately, right now, what we're seeing is that's not the case. It seems like the judiciary has been captured as well. And that's what's so scary. Luckily, the Supreme Court with the 6-3. And, it's actually kind of interesting. If you look at the recent decision splits, you saw Ketanji Jackson Brown side with the conservative court regarding the January 6th case on whether the Enron statute would apply to January 6th. So it's kind of interesting. So you're starting to see the Supreme Court's trying to do what it seems like the best to manage this, this crisis. I think our country's in a crisis because of these Marxists have driven the law. The law could always have, it was always ripe for this type of moment, Rich. Our founding fathers we didn't anticipate in so many ways that DAs were going to be going after presidents of the United States. So this is so shocking. Although it was possible, nobody anticipated this. But the Marxists they were willing to do it because they see President Trump, like you said, as a threat to democracy, which is the greatest irony because we've seen them go after him, try to remove him from the ballot. And it's because ultimately they don't trust the American people. So I don't know how it's all going to turn out because it's going to take way more litigation. This is just the beginning of it. It's going to take a lot of time for them to discover it. And even if the district court says it's an unofficial act, that will get appealed, and that's probably going to go up all the way to the Supreme Court as well. So it's going to take a long time to settle this. But the Supreme Court, I think, was very wise in their decision to do this, and I think the timing was good because now it allows President Trump on the trail. And this is, he's had a phenomenal last 5 days, and it seems like he's winning so much while the Biden administration is collapsing.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something, Abe Hamadeh. The tide is shifting. The tables are turning. Even like barbecues that I'm going to over the weekend. I went to a barbecue with some people over the weekend, and I'd seen these people last around Christmas time. And during Christmas time, I was like, I don't know, your guy Trump, how he's going to do, blah, blah, blah. I walked into the barbecue, and they were like, man, your guy Trump, this guy's winning. Congratulations, you guys won the election. It was just so interesting to see how people, their opinions shift and how things are going. So stick with me, Abe Hamadeh. I want to make sure we get your reaction to some of the media's reaction to this because, of course, they're up in arms, making up stories as they usually do. Folks, our guest is Abraham Hamadeh. Abe is a candidate that's endorsed by former President Trump for the 8th District of Congress in Arizona. He's a former prosecutor, former U.S. Army Reserve captain, where he served as an intelligence officer. His website is abeforaz.com, abeforaz.com. And we're coming right back. Your thoughts and more following our discussion with Abe Hamadeh. I'm Rich Valdez.
The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
It's not clear what's the greater threat to the republic, and it doesn't seem like the majority really has taken as seriously the concern of half the country about renegade presidencies in the office. I think the Supreme Court is hurting itself. There was, I believe, a way to come to a better outcome, a quicker outcome, an outcome that better balanced the interests here. What I think people are going to take away from this, Donald Trump has a Supreme Court that will let him do whatever he wants to, and that is terrifying.
All right, folks, that's Van Jones on CNN today reacting to the Supreme Court decision that says presidents are immune from doing what they're doing in the operation of their job. And he's not done melting down. I have another clip I'm going to play for you, but I want to bring our guest back in. Abe Hamadeh. Abraham Hamadeh is a Trump-endorsed candidate for Congress in Arizona, 8th District. Check him out at abefораrizona.com. He's a former prosecutor as well as an intel officer in the U.S. Army. Now, Abe Hamadeh, when you hear Van Jones say that Trump has a Supreme Court that will let him do absolutely anything he wants, what's your initial gut reaction to that?
Well, it's quite ironic because President Biden right now is the one going after his political opponents, right? I mean, look at his number 3 head of the Department of Justice left that position to take a low-level position in the district attorney's office in New York to go prosecute President Trump in that phony trial. I mean, everything that these media talking heads say, I think the American people are ignoring because they're lying to the American people. We saw that with the debate. Everybody in the media was trying to say that, President Biden is okay, and everybody saw that he wasn't. And the one thing that's actually a victory for Biden in all of this is that he can't be prosecuted for our open border that he's done intentionally and allowed these millions of illegal immigrants to come in, because that's his official act, was to not do anything, which I find quite disastrous in what's happening. So the Van Jones and all of these left-wing media talking heads, they're just they speak in hyperbole constantly because they have nothing to run on because the Democrat policies are failing. They've abused the law, and Americans are seeing the weaponization of the rule of law against Republicans. I mean, look at today, Rich. Today, yeah. Steve Bannon is sitting in prison. Yet we have Biden's Department of Justice head, Merrick Garland, who has defied the same thing that Steve Bannon did and Peter Navarro did, defied the congressional subpoena, and yet he is walking free. So we are seeing the two-tier system of justice right before our eyes, and the American people are looking at it, and that's why I said the law in our country was always fragile, and it took somebody quite evil and nefarious to really expose it. George Soros started this off 10 years ago by getting these radical DAs in. Biden has expedited it now with his lawless presidency, and so the media heads, that's their go-to, is a threat to democracy, because for so long they thought that was working, and that was working. But now with the rise of alternative media like these radio programs and Newsmax and so many of these other channels, people are just not buying it anymore.
Yeah, I'm with you. Listen, I think they've been beating the drum on this is a threat to democracy. This is a threat. Trump's a threat to democracy. Abe Hamadeh is a threat to democracy. Rich Valdez is a threat to anything they disagree with is a threat to democracy. I get it. It's very hyperbolic. I think it's stupid, but that's their right? It's free speech. But Van Jones, he's still there on CNN beating the drum. Now it's not only a threat to democracy. He goes on to say that this is a green light for criminal activity coming out of the White House. I mean, I feel like it's whatever the superlative of hyperbole is, that's where Van Jones is. Listen to this one.
I'm concerned. It's a real test. If you have someone in office who has no respect for the law, no respect for Republican virtues, no respect for the Constitution, no respect for norms, and then you have a Supreme Court that says, well, you know what? We've never before had to look at whether you could commit crimes. The Supreme Court says there's some crimes you can commit. That's scary, man. That's not. I mean, you can't just hope that somehow the Senate, which is broken, is going to fix this. The Supreme Court is functioning, and it is basically giving a green light for criminal activity in the Oval Office under certain circumstances, which I think, given the present state of our country, is very, very scary.
So, Abe Hamadeh, you hear that, and do you feel scared? I actually feel like, the Supreme Court actually did their job today.
Well, and of course they did. And what he's saying is factually untrue, and that's why I'm laughing and chuckling. I mean, they literally say it's only in his official act as president. So the criminality aspect of it, that's assuming that, there's something official going on, but it wouldn't be. So, they don't know what to do because they're not getting their way. They attack the court. They're attacking the legitimacy of the court. And, we have to be, we are lucky that they didn't decide to pack the court because they couldn't pass the filibuster reform. And that's what's coming next, by the way, Rich, which is why we can't it's not enough just to get President Trump elected. We have to recapture the Senate. We have to maintain control of the House because these radical Marxists are going to do everything they can to try to take power away from the American people. They are so scared of that right now. But no, Van Jones, it is so ironic just hearing these left-wing media. All they do is constantly lie. And if he actually read the opinion, it clearly distinguishes between official acts and unofficial acts. Even Sonia Sotomayor, a justice on the Supreme Court, I mean, her rhetoric in reading the dissent was so hyperbolic, as saying that, he can send SEAL Team 6 to assassinate political opponents. I mean, and you're looking around, and, I think I am scared that the legitimacy of the court is waning because of how politicized it's becoming from the left. And it seems like we're in a psychosis, Rich. I mean, just like during the COVID times, it feels like a mass formation psychosis going on with this Marxism. And you're having people, who should know better. They're in their 60s or in their 50s, and yet they are using this rhetoric as if they're teenagers on Twitter, and they should be the ones on the Supreme Court, not, giving reassurances to the American people. President Trump, look at Biden. I think Biden's activities in office are a lot more suspicious, and not just him, but his family as well. But, the left-wing media, we know what they do. They constantly lie to the American people, and that's why nobody's taking them seriously.
Abe Hamadeh, you bring up a good point about Justice Sotomayor's comments about the assassination of a president. And while assassinations, I think, at times can fall into the purview of the commander-in-chief, it's never the job of the commander-in-chief to say, I'm going to assassinate the person running against me. Right? That is obviously not what they're calling to do. But I want to get your take on that and pull on that thread a little more when we return, because we've got one of the deep state's favorites, Andrew Weissman. He was on MSNBC saying that this is exactly that, and there is a big danger to have assassinations coming from anyone deemed a political adversary. I want to get your take on that when we return. Folks, plus your calls, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. We're on with Abe Hamadeh.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-Valdez. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-Valdez. That's Valdez with an S.
Mr. Call Screener, who is a budding radio star, by the way. Richie Valdez is terrific.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
This decision today makes it so imperative that the person who holds the office understand the limits on and exercises those powers with restraint, because the thing that is not dealt with here is the hypothetical that was dealt with in the Court of Appeals about SEAL Team 6. And it is unclear how they actually studiously avoid dealing with that, because you could make the argument that that is official conduct. At the very least, presumptively
how would you make that argument?
You'd sit there and say, I have determined as commander-in-chief that this is necessary. And the way that Judge Pan in the lower court phrased it was, what if the president decides that a political adversary is a threat to democracy and orders the killing? That is and why isn't that now an official act with a presumption of immunity? And you don't look at motive. You can't consider that he's doing it to get rid of his adversary.
So that is Andrew Weissman, one of the deep state's favorites on MSNBC today, saying that this Supreme Court decision will allow presidents to order the assassination of anyone that they deem a political adversary. I want to get reaction from Abe Hamadeh. Abe, what do you think?
Well, Andrew Weissman, exactly what you said. He's a deep state operative. Let's not forget the Bob Mueller, BS investigation that President Trump had to go through for 2 years, when they should have been investigating Hillary Clinton and her involvement with the foreign intelligence to try to frame President Trump with the whole Russia collusion hoax. And that's exactly what Devin Nunes and Kash Patel and all of them had to get out, despite the media's attention on it. But it seems like Andrew Weissman is scared, Rich, actually.
Yeah.
I think a lot of these people are scared because they're scared that President Trump is going to get reelected, God willing, and it's going to take all of us to do that, and that there's going to be justice and accountability coming. But the idea that here, I love how they throw in the SEAL Team 6. Like, that's the only people that can assassinate somebody. For them to suggest this, if you look at what President Trump is doing, President Biden is doing right now, what President Biden is doing, he is trying to take, President Trump has a sentencing next week, Rich. He has a sentencing in a New York state court that was led by Biden's third highest ranking official of the Department of Justice. There is a sentencing hearing.
You're talking about Colangelo.
Yes, correct. Matthew Colangelo. And so there's a sentencing hearing next week. So all of their hypotheticals are actually being played out in real time. And what's really concerning
by
to
them.
Me, yes, exactly. And what's concerning to me is they're almost giving justification right now, like what you keep saying with this threat to democracy narrative. At what point, if by saying that he is the biggest threat to democracy, I am worried that they're going to try to steal the election once again. I'm worried that they're going to do something catastrophic, jail him, even though we'll see what the sentencing recommendation is in a few days. But they constantly project, because that is exactly, and they have the media apparatus behind them. And that's why we appreciate people like you who are able to counter this narrative, Rich. But, Andrew Weissman, if you see, they're very scared. And I actually do think that they should be, because I do believe that there was a lot of illegal acts that they were involved with. None of this witch hunt should have happened, what they did with the Bob Mueller investigation. There's been no accountability, no justice with Hillary Clinton, with Hunter Biden. We all see what's going on. And I think they're starting to lose the grip of the machine that they've controlled, which was, for a long time, they were able to influence the courts in so many ways. And now with this Trump-appointed majority Supreme Court, I think they're bringing back some balance. And it's not totally balanced. If you remember, like last week with that decision that they're basically allowing the Biden administration to communicate with big tech companies for censorship. So it's not totally on our side, but there is a big balance happening on the Supreme Court, which I think is important. But Andrew Weissman, it looked to me, he is no different than than all of these other people like Van Jones, who talk in this hyperbolic tones, is because I think they're fearful of President Trump. And honestly, President Trump, remember that moment after the election in 2016, people asked him, are you going to prosecute Hillary Clinton? And he's the one who said, no, I don't think it would be appropriate for our country to do that. Remember how disciplined President Trump was. And instead, once they sense weakness, they take advantage of it and they pounce. And you got to give credit to the Marxist Democrats. You got to give them credit, because they take, when they have power, they utilize the hell out of it, Rich. It's about time. It's about time Republicans and America First Republicans do the same thing, because there's no way out of this Marxist revolution until there's consequences for their actions as well.
Yeah, I've always said the easiest way to get somebody to stop punching you in the face is to punch them back in the face, and then they might stop. But you raise an interesting point. Now, I'm just going to posit something to get your thought on it, which is, I do believe that what Andrew Weissman is saying is coming from a place of concern and fear. I don't know if it's honestly Donald Trump per se. I'm going to call it the Trump effect. And by that, I mean, the threat that they say is to democracy, I think the real threat is to deep state, right? The threat is to the deep state, to their power structure. And that is what threatens them. And that's what scares them about Trump, that the people are also fed up, right? It used to be just this one billionaire from New York that came to Washington and started breaking things. Now there's a whole bunch of people like him or that support him and know what's going on and support that idea. And that, to me, is, I think, what they call a threat to democracy, and I call a threat to the deep state.
I love the way you phrase it. I think that's exactly right. These unelected bureaucrats who have all this power, and they haven't been given that power by the American people. And if you look at the Supreme Court decision that just came out, even Jack Smith, whether the constitutionality of his own appointment of special counsel, whether that is constitutional or not. Right. So people like Jack Smith, who is this private citizen, because, he's not officially at the Department of Justice, of having them go after a president, a former president, it shows you the power of the deep state right now, that they're losing the narrative that they were able to control for so long. They're able to keep the presidency in wraps, essentially. So
Right.
I do think the way you phrase it is exactly right. It's not a threat to democracy. It's a threat to them and their power and the deep state's power. And I think President Trump, thank God he is still running for president. That man could have easily retired and just walked away from the fight, but instead he's going, getting accused of all sorts of things. Remember, it's not just this conviction in New York. You had the E. Jean Carroll BS lawsuit that went on where they changed the statute of limitations to purely go after him from something that they claimed happened 30 years ago.
Georgia, Jack Smith.
Oh, everything going on. Here in Arizona, they're going after his associates. Look what they did to Rudy Giuliani, American mayor, who's a patriot. So this is where, President Trump has a big job, and when I'm in Congress, we do too. We have to prioritize fixing our country that they destroyed, but also getting accountability so this never happens again.
Abe, I want you to tell everybody how they can learn more about your campaign, donate to your campaign, and keep in touch with you.
Absolutely. They can go to abeforaz.com, or they can follow me on Twitter at Abe Hamadeh. And if they're in Arizona, I know ballots go out on July 3rd, and voting is July 30th, and I'd be honored to have their endorsement and their vote. And I'm proud to be fighting alongside President Trump. I'm also endorsed by Kerry Lake. We're fighting for the America that they stole from us, and we're going to take back our country from these villains.
Check out Abe Hamadeh at abeforaz.com. Abraham Hamadeh, I want to thank you for being here. We'll have you back real soon. Godspeed, my brother.
Thank you, Rich.
You bet. Folks, we're coming right back. Your calls and more, plus my stories, my tales and adventures from the Jersey Shore, and James O'Keefe's birthday party. Coming up next.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
All right, Americanos, welcome back, my amigos. Listen to this. Eye-popping 72% of respondents to a CBS YouGov poll don't think Biden has the mental and physical strength to be president. This is a lot, right? 72%. That means only 27% of respondents in the CBS News YouGov poll felt that Biden, who's 81 years old, possesses the necessary mental strength needed for the grueling duties of the commander-in-chief, making, these decisions very stark difference from just prior to the debate. 2 weeks ago, they did this. 35% that he did and 65% he did not. So it's going up. It went from 65% of people on a poll saying this guy does not have what it takes to be president to now 72% of people saying he does not have what it takes to be president. That is some pretty scary stuff. Anyway, I do want to give a good birthday shout out to my buddy James O'Keefe, who celebrated his birthday in Brooklyn, New York on Friday night, where he did a DJ set, which was kind of cool. O'Keefe is, I don't know, I'm going to call him a Renaissance man, where he's a brilliant mind in investigative journalism. He's courageous, but he's also very creative, and even in terms of like I don't want to say musical theater, but in the arts. If you've ever seen when he was making the early videos, the Acorn video and stuff like that, he dressed up like a pimp. He was like doing the moonwalk and whatnot, and he likes to dance. Anyway, he threw a good party, and he did a DJ set. If in his retirement he wants to be a DJ, I think he would do a fantastic job. So shout out to James O'Keefe. Folks, more to come straight ahead. Hour number 2 is upon us. 833-4-VALDEZ, 833-482-5337. We're going to talk about PTSD, politics, the news of the day, and more straight ahead. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to hour number 2 of the program. Happy to be here Monday night. Our phone number, 833-4825, 337-833-4-Valdez. And we're going into Independence Day week. A lot of things going on, lots of news out there. You had a federal judge that blocked an Oklahoma law that was barring illegal immigrants. We'll get into that a little bit later. House Republicans filed a lawsuit against Attorney General Garland for not releasing the Robert Hur audio interview of President Biden. Hunter Biden is now desperately urging his father, Joe, to stay in the presidential race. Maybe he's angling for a pardon or a commutation, even though Joe Biden has said he won't do that. So maybe Joe drops out and says, I won't do it, but Kamala will. You never know. And there is an announcement from the federal government that they're going to pause student loan payments, interest for 3 months, for 3 million borrowers in the latest attempt for Biden to try and, buy himself a few more votes. And there's a little bit more, right? We'll continue talking about what's going on. Of course, the major news of the day, the Supreme Court handed this huge win to President Trump in a lawsuit he filed saying that he has immunity in the commission of duties that he commits while he's president. And of course, they did agree. And that got bounced back to the lower court for them to interpret, what these duties were. So lots to discuss. And like I mentioned, we're going into the July 4th weekend. And, in a couple of days. It's Monday, of course. But that brings a lot of moments that trigger things, right? For your pets, for veterans, people that are very sensitive to certain loud noises, fireworks and whatnot. And it could trigger PTSD. And oftentimes, people don't really understand post-traumatic stress disorder and everything that it brings, that comes with it, I should say. June 27th, just before we paused for the weekend, was National PTSD Awareness Day. And there's a new virtual reality treatment that I want you to hear about. It treats PTSD. This report is from Brent Kearney at WTA in Pensacola, Florida. Check this out.
These virtual reality goggles are designed to immerse people in a whole new world.
As you float through this space, feel the tension leaving your body.
It's one of the newest methods of treating PTSD.
Now, what was your first experience like when you saw this? Did you feel like this is going to make a difference? Wow, this is going to work?
Oh, 100%. So I guess you could say my first experience, I was really honestly mind blown.
Elizabeth Williams is an innovation specialist with the VA. She says more than 100 veterans on the Gulf Coast are using VR to cope with their symptoms.
We have clinicians that are using it for things like in vivo exposure, phobia-based, therapies with their clinicians. So, that could involve putting them in an environment that they have a fear of, and they could process that fear with their clinician.
The VA says there's been a lot of success with this treatment, and veterans can use it at home. But Williams says this treatment is not for everyone and should only be used if recommended by a doctor.
Virtual reality definitely doesn't replace any, treatment with a provider. It's just another tool for us to be able to offer to veterans to help with things like PTSD.
So that report, of course, doesn't end there. It doesn't end with veterans. But interesting how they're exposing people through virtual reality to these traumatic situations to help release some of this past trauma. And I thought that was an interesting thing. But there's a lot to learn about this. Like something I just recently learned, looking at some of the information I have in front of me. There's research out there that suggests that men are less likely to develop PTSD than women are. But when men do, the symptoms can be way more challenging to identify because men internalize their symptoms and hide them. This obviously leads to delayed treatment, delayed diagnosis, etc. So I want to get to the bottom of this with Dr. Salvatore Giorgianni. He is a doctor of pharmacy and a senior science advisor to the Men's Health Network. He's the past chair of the American Public Health Association, and he's a former Alumni Association board member at Columbia University School of Public Health. Dr. Giorgianni, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me on this evening.
It's my pleasure. So I want to chat a little bit about this because, again, it's a conversation I think that we don't have often enough, and I think there's a lot of people that deal with post-traumatic stress and the related disorder. Let's talk a little bit about, first, the report you just heard. What do you think about this virtual reality treatment to help people be exposed to trauma and help them work through it?
I think it's a very important modality. I agree 100% that it may not be for everybody. And that really is one of the most difficult things about trying to help people manage through their PTSD. Because you don't really, in most cases, you don't really ever get rid of it. You just help people manage through it. One of the reasons that someone might get PTSD vary dramatically all over the place, from an adult childhood experience that might have been adverse, that caused lifelong traumatic responses to certain events, to a war environment, to other horrific personal events, or even something just emotional distress brought on by a friend or a spouse over long periods of time. So the reasons that someone gets PTSD are varied all over the world there, all over the place, and so are the ways to treat it. Pharmacologic treatment sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't work. Therapeutic discussion, psychological discussion sometimes work, sometimes doesn't work. We've seen things such as animal horse riding being used in certain individuals to help give them, strength and focus. So there are lots of things. So anything new that comes along, particularly with some of the amazing technologies that are out there, is certainly worth a try.
Yeah, I agree. And, recently I read an article about something called stellate ganglion block injections, where they put injections in one's neck in order to release trapped trauma. What can you tell me about this? Because it sounds kind of out there.
I will be honest, I had not heard of that. And one thing I've learned over the decades, I've been doing this for over 50 years, is if you don't know, don't say. But I do think that, there are, not saying anything about this particular ganglia blocking, and it's used in pain management for sure. But I don't know if it's useful, but there are many, many things out there touted to treat PTSD because it is so difficult, and because people want relief, and because the loved ones around individuals with PTSD, who also have a very difficult time managing their lives, they look for solutions. So many times there are things that are put out there, particularly in the age of the internet, which may not be helpful and indeed may be harmful. So I do think that anyone who suspects that they have PTSD, or a loved one who suspects someone that's close to them has PTSD, we can talk a little bit about the symptomatology if you like, they should seek out medical opinion first. And physicians don't always have all the answers. It is very difficult to treat. Folks at the VA who are expert at this, unfortunately, because of so many warriors coming back with trauma, it's a very difficult thing to treat. But I do think that you have to be very circumspect, because you can, unfortunately, do more harm with some of the things that are purported, not just in not affecting treatment, but also re-traumatizing or traumatizing in a different way.
Now, you mentioned the treatment, the diagnosis, and et cetera. I'm interested in knowing how the differences in symptoms, right? There's some data that suggests that men display the symptoms differently than women. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, one of the hallmarks of PTSD that differentiates itself from anxiety, depression, withdrawal, psychosis, and other non-traumatic related psychological deficiencies or problems is that it's almost always tied to a particular event or activity or scenario. Now, it may not be that the individual affected may not even know why they are having these feelings of anxiety, depression, but it's almost always related to some sort of event. And if you can find the event, you'll find the triggers. Men in general have much less ability to talk about their emotions. We are taught as young men, get up, shake it off, keep going. And that extends on through our most of our life. And that also applies to many in the military, by the way. You know, the military folks are trained to not pay too much attention to pain, and that unfortunately also includes emotional pain. So men don't generally seek care for many conditions, including emotional hurt conditions. They don't articulate them as well as women often do. So it's not surprising that the study you quoted earlier on said that men are not generally recognized as having PTSD or any another emotional distress. One of the hallmarks, one of the things that I point to show how difficult it is to get men to go in for a diagnosis or treatment of any mental condition is that over 70% of individuals, of men who commit suicide, have never had a psychiatric diagnosis. Yet clearly there are some psychological issues going on if you believe suicide is a psychological condition.
I would suspect so. Folks, we're on with a doctor of pharmacy. He is our guest, Dr. Salvatore Giorgianni, senior science advisor to the Men's Health Network. And we're going to continue our discussion with him straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. He's brown, he's bald, and he's breaking it down. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We continue our discussion with Dr. Salvatore Giorgianni. He's a doctor of pharmacy. He's a senior science advisor at the Men's Health Network. And we're talking about PTSD, how it affects men differently. And even within that age bracket, it also affects younger men versus older men differently. Doc, tell us more.
Yeah, we often think of PTSD associated with military, with first responders, individuals who are in a high risk sort of work, where they're subjected to a lot of difficult situations. But also, unfortunately, we're seeing it more and more in children, and we're also seeing it in individuals, men and women, after COVID, as a secondary effect of COVID-related incidents. There's a thing called adverse experience.
Doc, let me just ask you, do you think that is related to the lockdowns or the actual illness itself?
Yes. Not to be flip about it, but both. I have long believed, and many who've looked at this, looked at the symptomatology, looked at the way people are responding, certainly the influences of lockdown, the damage to the economy, the damage to social networks have led to a myriad of conditions, emotional disability for individuals, physical disability, but we're also seeing a lot of, unfortunately, neurologic effects of COVID that also include psychological long-term effects, depression, sleeplessness, malaise, fatigue. We're not seeing some of the things that are traditionally seen with PTSD, dissociation, although that certainly can be part of the cluster, stressfulness, being startled at certain events. But, there are many who believe that the coronavirus is one that can attach itself to neurologic elements in the central nervous system, and that's leading to some of these long-term symptoms. Everybody knows that if you've had anybody who's had COVID or knows someone who's had COVID, which I think is probably just about everybody, knows that one of the secondary effects is terrible, terrible fatigue. That's not just physiologic fatigue, it's mental fatigue. Early on in the pandemic, we saw people with mental fog. So I think that we're seeing traumatic stress disorder from the secondary emotional and psychological effects, and we're seeing them from the results of lockdowns, economic depression, and social network disruptions that were also, unfortunately, part of the scenario we've had to face with COVID.
Wow. Now, Doc, I find that, obviously it makes a lot of sense. You're right. Both the isolation and the infection can be a cause for this PTSD. When you say you've seen an increase following COVID, was it really like a marked increase, a very spiked increase? Would you say like the majority of people that went through COVID are now experiencing PTSD, or is it a small percentage?
It's just, what we know with PTSD, or the trauma of having had COVID and then having stress disorder after it, is a small percentage. But the other effects, such as emotional distress in general, lack of socialization in our younger individuals, increase in alcoholism and substance use disorder, these are all things that are dramatically on the rise. We've seen, unfortunately, also a dramatic increase in suicide in individuals associated with some of those other causal effects post-COVID. So we will only know historically several years in the future how this shakes out, and if it was truly due to COVID, or truly due to economy, or truly due to some other environmental stressors. But my gosh, the folks who work in emergency room, they all write, and I read it in the literature all the time, that they've never had so many individuals appearing in emergency departments needing psychological care as they've seen before. And one thing that the general public can do, so I'm always trying to help folks understand what you can do to address these problems in your family and the community. There's a technique called emotional first aid that's being taught in many, many workplaces for line supervisors, for HR people. It's being used in some schools. Some pharmacy departments are also training their staff in it in retail. And this is just a technique that helps folks understand when someone is distressed, and the signals of being in emotional distress for women and men are very, very different. I don't think we have time to talk about it, but they are different.
We're down to a few seconds.
Yeah, what to do first and how to do it. So if you are looking at, doing something to help your community, look into emotional first aid. And
emotional first aid. Folks, if you want to learn more about emotional first aid, make sure you check out the work of Dr. Salvatore Giorgianni at the menshealthnetwork.org. Doc, I appreciate you being here. The music means we got to go. I appreciate it.
Okay. Have a good tomorrow day.
You bet. Happy 4th of July to you. Folks, Rich Valdez coming back with some talk on will they dump Biden or not.
Rich Valdez, who, again, will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to him.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We continue our discussion, and the big question I think a lot of people have is whether Joe Biden is going to be replaced as the nominee. Now, this has been the talk of the town, honestly, since he ran. They said, there's no way. They're just going to use Biden to coalesce the vote, right? Because it was Bernie Sanders who was getting the majority of the votes. And they said, no, but Biden is the guy. He's going to be the standard bearer. They're going to use him to get elected, and then they're going to switch him out for Michelle Obama, right? You remember that? That was 2016. 2016. 2020, excuse me. And then here we are, 2024, and we're still singing the same song. But now there's a lot more reason to think that Biden may get trounced out of there. I tend to not think that he's going anywhere, but I'd love to have a discussion on that and see where it goes. Even Chuck Todd on Meet the Press has questions on whether Democrats are standing behind Biden. Are they putting the party over their country? Listen to this.
Democrats want to lecture Republicans for putting party over country and how they've been enabling of Donald Trump. Mitch McConnell is frequently criticized for that moment where he decided to prioritize not dividing his own party and letting Trump off the hook by not voting to convict him during the impeachment. Can Democrats really sit there and say, you know, this is not about whether you think Biden can win the election. He might be able to win the election. It's not because he's Joe Biden. It's because he's not Donald Trump. The real issue is he telling the truth about whether he can serve a full 4 years? And there's a lot of challenges in the world. We want a president who could be incapacitated? This is one of those where you got to say to yourself, this is hard. There's no doubt. There's risk no matter what you do here. But you got to say to yourself, what's in the best interest of the country, not the party? What's in the best interest of the country in the next 4 years?
So it sounds like the Democrats are really coming hard. They're calling their friends, which I like to call the left within the media, the left within our government, the left everywhere is kind of coalescing around, let's get rid of Biden. I don't know if it happens or not. I don't think they're going to sidestep Kamala Harris. I don't know what that process is going to look like. But there's some that are out there saying Governor Wes Moore is a possibility, Gavin Newsom's a possibility, and so many others. So I want to get to the bottom of that with somebody who's got her finger on the pulse of what's going on, and that is Gianna Miceli. She talks about culture, she talks about the law, and she's got a book called Freedom, the Patriots Playbook to Restoring Your Rights and Freedom. Gianna Miceli, welcome.
Hey, Rich, thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. Now, let's talk a little bit about your thoughts on what goes on with the upcoming Democrat convention. Does Biden get replaced? Do you think that there's pressure being created just to get him to remove himself? Is it pressure to get the cabinet to invoke the 25th Amendment? Or is it, just, folks like us that are, making more of it than it is?
Well, I've seen on X that there's a handful of states that it's already too late to remove his name from the ballot.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in new territory if they do, don't you think?
Yeah, well, they also have superdelegates, and I guess they would have to figure out a way. He still doesn't have the official nomination. So I guess, lawsuits would follow. I don't know the process of getting the ballot changed when they say, hey, we're the Democrat Party and we changed the person.
Is, nobody's running.
Right. Who are these people? Where would they come from?
This year, like I've driven in the month of June, I moved from Nevada to Florida for my fourth time trying out Florida. So I drove from Louisiana to here, but I also drove from Louisiana to Missouri to visit my brother, and I saw no Biden signs anywhere. Do you want to know the only place I've seen a Biden-Harris 2024 sign, a gigantic flag, is in the on the home of the owner of C-SPAN on the Fort Lauderdale Intercoastal.
Wow.
Now that's obvious.
I've
right?
also not seen them. Right. I've also not seen them. And so I guess it's safe to say that you're in agreement with me that we're likely looking at Biden as the candidate in November.
That's what I think. Now, I ran for assembly once in Nevada, and I pulled out in May, and the election was November, and I told them that I was leaving. I got assaulted by 3 homeless men, and the police wouldn't arrest them. So I'm like, I got to go. If the police aren't even going to protect me, it was one of the times I left, and I still ended up on the ballot. So I think the presidential nomination has to be something far more serious than my little assembly, and it's too late to take him off. Now, the big question is, are they just going to cross off Joe and enter Jill and keep the Biden name? Because why is she on the cover of Vogue?
Right. Yeah, well, it's obviously not for her fashion sense. But I don't know that that's a win, and you never know. Now, Mika Brzezinski, she was on Morning Joe today. She co-hosts with her husband, Joe Scarborough. I call the show The Morning Joke. And she's asking, why aren't there calls for Trump to drop out of the race? Listen to this.
The man who would end key global alliances. The man who has promised retribution against his perceived political enemies. The man who on a regular basis makes no sense at all. When he sounds crazy and slurs his words and talks about batteries and sharks, why aren't there calls for Trump to drop out? Where are they?
So Gianna Miceli, that's again Mika Brzezinski, and she says that we should be calling on Trump to drop out. What's your thought on that?
She's one of my favorite lunatics. The projection is so clear and so obvious. And have you been on social today where I've been saying, I think they send out talking points daily to these, propaganda operatives. Now they're the ones saying, oh, he's a dictator. Oh, really? How is he a dictator? Because everything that is happening, such as the Supreme Court rulings, we are rolling back to the Republic, is my opinion. And that's all that I want. We are the greatest threat to democracy because we're restoring the Republic.
Yeah, I
That's
hear
what
that.
that Chevron did.
Now, I want to get your thoughts on some Trump VP picks, and I also want you to tell us a little bit about your book, so I want you to stick with us. Folks, we're on with Gianna Miceli. She's a culture and legal commentator and author of the book, Freedom, the Patriots Playbook to Restoring Your Rights and Freedom. Folks, stick with us. We're coming right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
I'm so glad to be on your show, Rich. It's just an amazing broadcast that I hope the rest of America listens to every day.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And there's been a lot of talk about who Donald Trump will pick as his vice presidential candidate. And there's been talk about Tulsi Gabbard, Marco Rubio, let me see, who else? J.D. Vance, a senator, as well as Vivek Ramaswamy, Byron Donalds, a congressman from Florida, and Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I mean, just a lot of people out there. Some have made that short list even smaller or shorter. But I want to get the reaction of our guest and her input on this. She's the author of Freedom, the Patriots Playbook to Restoring Your Rights and Freedom. Gianna Miceli, welcome back. What are your, well, before we go into your thoughts, I want you to hear a clip of President Trump with Byron Donalds. Byron Donalds has been out there on the campaign trail, very aggressive for Trump, where I think a lot of people think he's definitely out there applying for the job of vice president. Listen to this roundtable that he was having with some African-American voters when they get a surprise call from Donald Trump. Check this out.
Oh, actually, hold on.
For the administration.
Hello.
Hey,
Mr.
President Trump.
Mr. President, how you doing? Well, I'm going to put you on speaker, but actually a great question just came up. We're talking about regulations and some of the things that can be done to alleviate the regulation burdens on a lot of businesses. But I'm going to put you on speakerphone for everybody to hear. Hold on a second. All right, everybody, you're on with the president.
Hello, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Hello, everybody. It's great to be with you. I hope I'm being well represented. I have a feeling I am. I know them very well. So I hope so.
No, you are, sir. But a question came up about regulations. And so what's your view of what we need to do with regulations when you come back into office?
Well, as you know, I cut taxes and regulations more than any other president. We had the biggest tax cut, bigger even than the Reagan tax cuts. And I also cut regulations far more than any other president. And they have put a lot of them back already. We will get them cut so fast. And, you know, it's very interesting when I went to business leaders and said, which was more important, these big tax cuts or these big regulation cuts? Almost every one of them said regulation cuts. Yeah. And it made a big difference to their businesses, small businesses and big businesses. Great question.
So that's, again, Byron Donalds out there, again, hitting the pavement, shaking hands, kissing babies, campaigning for President Trump. And as many people say, he's on the short list for vice president, as well as Florida Senator Marco Rubio and others. And I mentioned those two in particular because a lot of people say, the Constitution won't allow the president and VP to come from the same state because you can't get all of the electoral votes. And there's 30 electoral votes there, or 30 electors that are going to cast votes. So the question becomes, who will Donald Trump's person be? I'm still opting that I think if he's got enough of a landslide victory, he can do that, but hard to predict. Gianna Miceli, what do you think?
Well, I'm familiar with that rule, and I'm not a big fan of rules. That's what my book is about, how to remove the rules, codes, and statutes from your life. But I just moved to Fort Lauderdale, but I had lived previously in West Palm Beach a couple of winters. And so I did go to the, sort of rally that was on Donald Trump's birthday in West Palm Beach. And I introduced myself to Byron Donalds as a new Florida resident. And he was absolutely lovely in receiving me. He lit up like a Christmas tree and welcomed me. And he is tall and strapping, good eye contact, good handshake, and I was wearing my high heels, and he was still taller than me. When I think about who could be the vice president, because they could always potentially become the president, who can handle themselves at the G7? We've seen that video where Donald Trump kind of walks in front of everybody else as they're posing for the camera and inserts himself. And we know that was a fun moment. Donald Trump has a good sense of humor. But who could stand next to that very handsome and masculine alpha male, I think they call it SMB, the Saudi Arabian guy, I'm sorry, his name escapes me, Salman Mohammed. They call it SMD, I think.
Right.
It's Bin Salman, yeah.
Bin Salman, right.
The Bin Salman guy.
Bin Salman.
I'm sorry, I usually know the names, but it is late. And there's a video where Trump tapped him on the shoulder and he just looked up and, they look like regular people at that moment in time. And he smiled because it was Donald Trump, just coming by and tapping his shoulder. And so who could also fill those shoes and have conversations with these people? And it's not going to be Marco Rubio, that's for sure. It's not going to be Vivek. Byron Donalds has the background and the experience, and he's only 45 or 46. So by the time this presidency would be finished, he could very, very well be an awesome, groomed, 50-year-old young president of the United States in 2028.
Okay, so it seems like you think that is the way to go. I also think that Byron Donalds has the best prospects here. Most people, I think 8 out of 10 people hear me say that, and they think I'm out of my mind because how do you lose 30 electoral votes in Florida? Does he end up having to move? Does he not get the 30 electoral votes? It becomes a big question.
Can't Donald Trump just live technically at his New Jersey golf course? I don't know. I don't know these things.
I would presume that's a possibility. Right? That's one idea. So do you think that Trump would be leaning in a direction like that?
For Byron or for residing in Jersey? Yes, I think this is one of the most important decisions in the history of the world because he needs I'm not going to make sure Donald Trump is killed insurance policy.
Right. Now,
you can't have just another puppet.
Okay. Do you want to add to that?
No.
Okay. Folks are coming right back. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We continue our conversation with Gianna Miceli. She's the author of Freedom, the Patriots Playbook to Restoring Your Rights and Freedom. And you heard her mention a little bit about eliminating regulation from our lives. Gianna Miceli, tell us a little bit more about your book. All right.
You've been cutting out.
All right.
I'm sorry.
You want to tell us about the book?
Sentence? Yes.
All right, folks, it looks like we have a bad connection with Gianna Miceli. I apologize. Check out her website, GiannaMiceli.com. That's Gianna Miceli, Miceli.com. And I want to go to Larry in Newport, North Carolina, WTKF. Larry, your thoughts?
No respect to the doctor you had on there earlier, Rich, the PTSD guy.
Right.
I'm retired military, 20-year military police. I still
well, thank you for your service.
When I try to sleep, but cannabis, it's a cure for me. But I digress. That's not what I called you about. I called you about the debate, Rich. I thought your whole show was going to be about that tonight, like everything else is going on. Which I called about because I asked my girlfriend. My girlfriend, she never watched no debates or nothing like that stuff, but she suffered it because it was on every channel the other night. And I asked her about the first segment of the president, and she told me, Rich, at the first commercial break, I said, "You don't watch none of this stuff. I follow politics. What did you think of that?" Her response was crayons. That reminded me. It's something that right there, military guy. That flashback me to the guy, the commander in charge of the 101st Airborne, when the Germans told him surrender, and he said nuts. So I got her telling me crayons, and got this guy nuts. I mean, so I just went. I mean, I didn't even know how to take it. And I was saying,
me either. I'm so lost between the nuts and the crayons. How do we make sense of this, Larry?
Go ahead, Rich. Go for it, man.
All right, Larry in Newport, North Carolina, WTKF. I think we're having an issue with delay where I'm talking and they're not hearing me, and then they're talking and waiting for me to hear me. And it's a latency issue, it seems, with the last two calls. We should probably put in a call to engineering on that. But ultimately, I tend to agree with the guest and the caller. Right? I think Larry is spot on that there are people out there who aren't observing politics, and they think that the political landscape is solely what they saw in the debate, which I think would probably be a pretty accurate assessment. Right? In my opinion, I think Biden was so indicative of what we've seen in office since 2016. So good for him for putting on a good show so that people can see what he's really all about. But something that I mentioned earlier, and I'll kind of wrap up now, is this barbecue I went to over the weekend. I went to this barbecue over the weekend where I had not seen these people since Christmas time, some Cuban friends of mine. And when I went, they were like, "Oh, nice to meet you. A lot of respect. I heard about you. I heard about your show. But not really a big fan of Trump's. I just don't respect a lot of what he stands for, blah, blah, blah." Fast forward, that was Christmas time. Fast forward to Noche Buena in particular, right? Christmas Eve. Fast forward to this weekend, and there was a little pig roast. They invited me. I walked in, and several people were there waiting for me to come and say, "Hey, listen," they shake my hand. "I just want to tell you, you were right about everything you said at Christmas. Trump was being prosecuted for his politics. He's going to win this thing, and he's going to take it home because the Democrats are just, pooping the bed, per se." And it just makes me think what a difference 6 months makes. So I think when you look at the debate performance, it kind of comes full circle. And I think it would be a good move for Trump to bring Byron Donalds into the circle. We'll see if I'm right. Folks, stick with me. We're coming right back. Hour number 3, Open Phone America.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Your liberty-loving Latino amigo, happy to be here with you this evening. Monday night edition of the program, 833-482-5337 is our phone number, 833-4-VALDEZ. Looking forward to speaking with you, and a few things we want to talk about. Of course, on Thursday night, we had the nation's first in the nation reaction to the debate. We were live, we were national, from 10 o'clock Eastern to 1 a.m., giving you all of the reaction to the debate, the analysis, the opinions. We had a lot of really good guests on, a lot of great calls as well. And I'm looking forward to continuing part of that conversation tonight as people still want to talk about the debates. I'm happy to do that. But the big news of today, the Supreme Court handing Donald Trump a big win on presidential immunity, saying, yes, you have presidential immunity. Now the question is going to become, do you have presidential immunity on everything that you're claiming is to be a official act? So if he's president of the United States and he's asking for a recount or for ballots that were lost to be found, does that count as his official capacity? I would say yes, because he's a candidate who was president, right? An incumbent running for office. Also, with respect to the electors and all that stuff, all of this seems like the role that a president would have. Now, they may try to differentiate there and say that, no, this is the role of the candidate, but not the role of the president. And I think they're going to try and split hairs that way. Of course, while trying to paint him as somebody who is a dictator, who is a threat to democracy, and who is going to destroy the rule of law to gain retribution against his political opponents. Sound familiar? Sounds like Joe El Baboso Biden. And we got a lot of clips of audio I want to play tonight. We've got Jasmine Crockett, who I've got to come up with a name for her because she's funny. And we've got another clip from Nancy La Bruja Pelosi weighing in, who in this clip, she says so much and is so telling. But we're going to talk about a bunch of that stuff, plus your calls again, 833-4-VALDEZ. Now, I want to give you a little tidbit of how the Democrats went into damage control after the debate, saying things like, it's okay. Yeah, he wasn't that bad. Well, you listen, you tell me what you think. Listen to this.
Well, listen, if they weren't engaged in a little bit of hand-wringing, they wouldn't be Democrats.
Right now, Biden is 1 and Trump is still 0, and he's the only person that's ever beaten Trump. And I really believe that Joe Biden will do that again.
Joe Biden is our leader, and Joe Biden has earned and Joe Biden deserves the confidence, the respect, and frankly, the partnership that we now have to provide to him.
The polling I've seen after the debate has actually moved in the direction of Joe Biden.
I do not believe that Joe Biden has a problem leading for the next 4 years because he's done a great job of leading for the last 3.5 years.
It's not about performance in terms of a debate. It's about performance in a presidency. And I want you to know that the fact is that the reaction to the lies of Donald Trump is something that maybe TV isn't focusing on, but people are.
That is a bunch of clips put together of various Democrats defending Biden after his awful debate performance. That was Senator Raphael Warnock, Senator John Fetterman, Governor Wes Moore, Senator Chris Coons, Congressman James Clyburn, Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi. Everybody coming to the defense of Biden saying, look. Doesn't matter. If Biden has a pulse, if he's in a vegetative state, if he's in a bed, vote for him. A vegetated Biden is better than a robust and healthy Donald Trump. This is what they're going to try and sell you. Even Jasmine Crockett from Texas, she weighed in on this. Listen to this.
I stand with the President of the United States. I've been thinking about this. Obviously, Republicans will stand with, it seems like, the devil if it means that they are going to get their disastrous policies in place. That's all they care about. And I've been trying to stress to people that this election should be about them as individuals, and they should be voting not for the exact person, but the team. They need to be looking at who can control the House, who can control the Senate, as well as the White House, and what types of policies is that team going to push forward. And finally, I've ultimately decided that this is kind of like cough syrup. Nobody really likes the taste of cough syrup. But at the end of the day, they take cough syrup because cough syrup is what they need to heal their bodies. Right now, this country needs to be healed, and they will not find healing if they decide to deal with Donald Trump.
Well, there you have it, folks. I think Jasmine Crockett really summed it up. She said this is about control versus policies. She said that Republicans would vote for the devil if he gave them their policies. And I'm going to be the first one to say, I endorse that idea. Absolutely. If the devil runs for office and says he's running as a pro-lifer, he's running as a small government conservative that is dedicated to the rule of law, closing the border, and doing what's right in America, right? He might have a shot. Because what I'm not going to do is go with what she just said, that Democrats should be concerned with who can control the House, who can control the Senate. Excuse me? So I should vote for Democrats for control or Republicans who want to promote policy. I think the choice is clear as day. I'm going with the Republicans. Makes all the sense in the world to me. Anyway, I want to get your thoughts on this. Let's go with, we got lots of calls here. 833-482-5337 is the number if you want to join us. I want to go to Pat, Sedona, Arizona, listening to richvaldez.com. Go right ahead.
Hey, Rich, I knew you'd pick me first. You're my buddy. Hey,
yeah, you're first in the queue, my brother. Good to hear from you.
Another good show, as always.
Thank you.
I'm going to tell you what, you and I have been taking our lumps when everybody's been saying Biden's this, Biden's that, and I'm saying not necessarily, don't go that far. This guy has problems, you know, and I try to be respectful because he is the commander-in-chief, you know, he is so-called elected president. Depends on which side of the world you live on, but it's just that we came out to be truthful. And did we rub it in the faces of friends? I've gotten 3 phone calls from friends of mine that are Democrats that told me that he looked awful and that they are thinking of not voting for him. They're not certain about Trump yet, but I said, go with your heart, go with what you know is right. And I say, think about the people that are in his group, his team, like that lady from Texas talking about, you're not just voting for the person, you're voting for his team. Well, Trump's team is Garland. Oh, my God, the guy with the charge of the FBI. Oh, my goodness, there's another one. Oh, look at who they put on the Supreme Court. That lady talks about democracy. She's totally against it. She shouldn't even be on the Supreme Court. And they talk about the rest of them. I tell you, the Democrats should be like the Muslim people of this world whose religion was hijacked by a bunch of crazy people. The Democrats Party was hijacked by some extreme leftists that are destroying it, and they're destroying the country. And they should not be embarrassed. Let's get together and form an alliance. Because, you know, Biden said he's the uniter. No, he's been the exact opposite. The only person who will bring this country together will be Donald Trump. Donald Trump will swallow his pride, and he'll bring in Democrats that were giving him a hard time, with Republicans that have been giving him a hard time, and say, this is for the country. This is for the people. That's the important thing. That's who's the man Donald Trump is. He is for the people. And everybody calls us clans, you know, us Trumpsters. You know, I'm not a Trumpster. I'm an independent. I am voting for the person, not the party. And I'm voting for the ideals of stuff that should be pushed out there and discussed, not just jammed down our throat like this transgender stuff in our children, our schools, our education, our future, Rich. I know.
Yeah.
And you've been on the ball with all that. You've been so on mark, and your guests are amazing people, you know, and I just, you know, I applaud you and I applaud your show, and keep going. I mean, brother, you just keep going, because I tell you what, you get the word out there, And, we'll get more of our friends who called us a bunch of loonies, bunch of, conservative loonies, and now they're saying that, hey, you're right about this guy. And, I don't exactly hate Joe Biden, but he is not the man that should be running our country. The poor guy, he doesn't know where he is half the time.
I think you're right, Pat. And I want to thank, real quick, I just wanted to thank you for everything that you said. That was very kind of you. And you're right. It's not about hating Joe Biden, right? Everybody wants to respect their elders, and everybody wants the president to succeed, whomever the president is, right? Whether you like their policies or not, you want America to succeed. I don't necessarily want the Green New Deal to succeed. I don't want the elimination of gas stoves and gas-powered cars, but I do want America to do well. And it's a shame when people try to demonize these people. And I feel like I don't demonize. I ridicule the guy because I think he's worthy of ridicule. But ultimately, as Americans, we have to, I believe, make a choice for what's right for America. And the choice that's right for America is not Joe Biden. And I think that's been abundantly clear. And again, going back to my story at the barbecue this weekend with my Cuban friends. And these are Cuban friends that are outside of the norm of politics, because most Cubans are conservative Republicans because of their stance against communism and pro-liberty. But in this particular case, you had a bunch of Cubans that were not Republicans and did not like Trump, but they had now come around to him. And it was just really interesting to see that shift. Even one of the biggest critics who told me, he said, look, you're right. Your guy's going to win. I was wrong because I bet him $500. I said, look, like a year ago. I said, trust me, Trump's got this. And being Trump's got this, he's going to become the nominee. And he said, there's no way he becomes the nominee. There's no way the Republicans get behind him again. There's no way. And when he started to see the weaponization of the legal cases, this guy was a lawyer in Cuba. And he tells me, he's like, well, I can't believe what I'm seeing. He said, I never thought I'd see an America where they do exactly what they do in Cuba, where they're actually using the legal system to come after him on, his words, boberia, on the silliest of charges. He said, those are not crimes. And he said, this is going to backfire. Number one, they're creating a precedent. That was what scared him the most. He said they don't realize that what they're doing to Trump, they're going to do it to everybody moving forward. They've now politicized the Justice Department. And he was, shocked by that, but only recognized it because he was a lawyer in Cuba. And when I told him it was happening, he laughed in my face and said, that will never happen in this country. You have independent thinkers on your judiciary. That the separation of powers in your Constitution is what makes this country great. And he understood the American constitutional system and believed that we would never see communism in the United States. Now, I'm not saying that this is full-blown communism, but I am saying we're on the road. It's like Hansel and Gretel with the trail, with the crumbs. And it's a big problem. So, Pat, I think you're right. People are waking up to this idea. People are saying, wow, the debate was a big deal. The lawsuit was a big deal. A lot of things were a big deal where people are saying, you know what, this is not good. But for inflation, if Biden would have managed inflation and kept the Trump economy right where it was, I think he could have pulled over a lot of things on the American people. All he had to keep saying was, just keep looking at your bank account. Just keep looking at your 401k. Just keep looking at how you're spending your money, and you're going to be just fine. Because Bill Clinton taught us, right, through the Raging Cajun, James Carville, it's the economy, stupid. But this is where we ended up. So, Pat, I'm with you. Thanks for the call, brother. I appreciate you. Always do. It's always good to hear from you. Let me take a quick pause right here. Coming right back. Your calls and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. We continue with your calls and more. I want to go to, where were we? Betty, Aberdeen, South Dakota, KSDN. Betty, you're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. I
My pleasure.
appreciate it. I'm wondering what you think about what the scuttlebutt was on the news radio today, your other counterparts in the day, when they talked about the Democrats propping up Michelle Obama and
Betty,
doing a switcheroo at the
convention using superdelegates and whatnot. I've been hearing this for a while. We had a guest on this program, I don't know, 4 months ago, 5 months ago, who said that rest assured Michelle Obama will be the 2024 candidate. He had it spelled out. He wrote a book. He made a movie and everything. And I just couldn't get behind it. I felt that Michelle Obama has way too much going on in her life as a private person. Now, I do realize that she could easily say, my husband, former President Obama, will handle those affairs while I go and run for president. If I were a Democrat, I would say she's probably the way to go, right? She's got the Obama name. It's the easiest way to do a switcheroo and get him in. It would be the easiest way to not get in trouble for bypassing Kamala Harris, who is a black woman, and where I think if you say Joe Biden's not running and neither is Kamala, we're going to put in someone else, it better be a black woman, because if it's not, then I think there would be some uproar over saying, how are you going to bypass the first female black vice president who had a shot at being president? Why would you do that? So I think the Democrats would stand to lose in a scenario like that if they didn't run Michelle Obama. I just truly just don't see it. I don't feel it. I don't think that there's a scenario where Obama says, we'll have a lot more capability and power if we get back in the White House. Now, I know that's silly to say because there's a lot of capability and power in the White House, and they can always figure out ways to make money. But I truly believe they just really don't want to be in the White House anymore. They're enjoying it. If they did, they could have ran Michelle Obama in 2016. Why'd they run Joe Biden? Whatever that reason is the reason why she likely won't run now. And even then, I think she might be the best candidate to go against Trump, but I don't think it becomes a slam dunk. It can be. I'm not going to count it out, but I really don't think it's going to happen. That my belief is that Biden just continues into the slaughter. But if I were a Democrat, I would have put Michelle Obama in a while ago and said, you know what, we're taking on Trump head to head. Let's go. We'll see what happens. Betty, thanks for your call. Aberdeen, South Dakota, KSDN. I appreciate the call. Folks, we're coming right back. Your calls and more straight ahead. 833-4825-337, 833-4-VALDEZ. It's Open Phone America with me, Rich Valdez. Don't go anywhere.
Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Welcome back, everyone. There are an estimated 2,300 children missing every day in America. That means a child goes missing or is abducted in this country, in the United States, every 40 seconds. Last year, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children worked on nearly 29,000 cases. Today, 90% of those cases are resolved. The U.S. Marshals Service wanted to raise that number to 100. It has a special task force to find missing children before they end up being trafficked into gangs, prostitution, or even worse. The task force just wrapped up its second ever nationwide operation, and News Nation was there for the ride.
So the United States, that's Elizabeth Vargas, by the way, with News Nation setting this up. The United States Marshal Service finds 41 missing kids and busted 3, including a sex offender, In a 5-week operation in New York City, dozens of missing kids were found. Again, 3 people arrested, including a sex offender, in a 5-week-long citywide operation conducted jointly by the U.S. Marshal Service, the New York Police Department, and the Department of Homeland Security, known as HSI Investigations. These officials tracked down 41 critically missing children, including those coerced by adults into criminal activity or sex trafficking. Usually, it's frequently runaways. During an operation they called Operation We Will Find You Part 2. This spanned more than a month and wrapped up today, according to the U.S. Marshal Service. 1 sex offender with local warrants was arrested, in addition to 2 other people who were wanted on charges including robbery, parental kidnapping, and other charges, according to the marshals. And this is, an eye-opening thing that 41 children are found. I don't want to bury the lead here that one of the people there was a sex offender. That makes sense to me, right? It's pedophile sex offenders that do this type of crazy stuff. The craziest thing here is I don't want to go and bury the lead. 41 kids have been rescued. I think that is a huge deal. And that's the right thing to do. Ralph Sozio, he's the U.S. Marshal for the Southern District of New York. He said that we're committed to leaving no stone unturned in our efforts to bring missing children home safely. Through the collaboration of our law enforcement partners and community involvement, we aim to make a meaningful impact in safeguarding our children and bringing anyone who harms them to justice. Well, yeah, thank God for that. We have to do those things. Now, while some of these people that were abducted previously lived in New York City homeless shelters and in foster care, others are from out of state and ended up in the Big Apple. For years, I've always questioned why was it that when I was a kid, historically, orphanages were run by religious organizations and charities. And there was obviously, departments of children and families and whatever. But it was always something in the back of my head as a thought. Then as I became an adult, I worked in a state Department of Children and Families. And I saw how much control they had over children and how many they had in their custody. And I thought, why did the government get into the business that was once run by the church? By, women, some were widows, others that were volunteering their time to this ministry known as an orphanage. And I don't have an answer, but I do have speculation that the government had an incentive. And you look at situations like this, and it seems sinister and vile and conspiratorial, but just imagine if you wanted to provide access or a funnel, a supply of children to people. The best way to do it is to use your power as the state to say they all live here. Nobody wants them. We're going to create orphanages and group homes and whatever. We constantly don't know where these children are. We lose them, like they lost them at the Department of Homeland Security, Immigration, under Mayorkas' watch. I think the number's like 85,000 kids are missing. And they go, I don't know where they are. And they end up working in poultry factories, trafficked for labor, trafficked for sex, trafficked for abuse by pedophiles. Like we had a guest on this program who said that he was kidnapped at 4 years old and sent to a pedophile farm where men who are pedophiles pay to go on vacation there so they can rape 4-year-old, 5-year-old. He was there till he was 16 years old. That's when they cut him loose, or he escaped. And that's a remarkable and scary story. One that I think we can't forget. But those are real things. So 41 missing kids were recovered and rescued in this bust. 3 bad guys were caught. Good for them. Now, I want to go back to your calls and get some thoughts from you guys on the debate, what happens with politics, this story, and more. Let's continue. Let's go to, of course, the big Supreme Court case of the day as well. I want to go to Wayne. Wayne is in Bonners Ferry, Idaho, KBFI. Wayne, go right ahead.
There's trouble in River City, Rich. And
tell me more.
The Republicans smell blood in the water. As a matter of fact, they're actually swimming in a bloodbath after that debate, which was, if that didn't make you nervous, knowing that this guy has the codes and is running our country, or his wife is, or Obama is, then I don't know what to say about that. I feel that they're not going to be able to cook the books on this one, and Trump is going to become our president. But the spooks inside the CIA, who's a cabal, basically the deep embedded, unelected people who have been there for a very long time, who basically they're the puppet masters. They're the ones pulling the strings on the things that go on around this world, basically. And have been doing it for a very long time. They're the ones who orchestrated the death of Joe Kennedy, of John Kennedy, of Bobby Kennedy. And we stood by and watched it, accepting it, believing it hook, line, and sinker. And you don't think that they're going to have a target on our President Trump's back?
Sure, but the problem is I think they've had a target on his back since 2016. And what they did was they used lawfare. These are the same people that had a target on the back of Ronald Reagan and shot him, right? I believe, I don't think this was an isolated thing. I think they tried, and it was a swing and a miss. And it goes without saying that there's a lot of people that are enemies of Trump that want him eliminated, for sure. I think the question becomes, how successful are they going to be? They haven't been successful to date. I don't think that threat ever goes away for him. I don't think it's, all of a sudden today they go, all right, we're going to have to ratchet this up a few notches. This guy's a lot harder to take out than we thought. We might have to try this. I think they've been trying this for a long time. I would not be surprised, and I've heard reports about this, grapevine reports that are something I can't corroborate, so I don't speak of frequently. But I've heard of lots of reports of dozens and dozens of thwarted attempts received or known attempts to get rid of Trump one way or another. So, yeah, I think that's a realistic expectation to have for Trump. I think he has it, irrespective of what you and I are talking about. I think that's why he travels with a lot of protection. And guy's a smart guy. He does what he can. And, Godspeed to him. But I don't think for a second that there's not a threat on him. I think there's always a threat on him. There was a threat on him as president. There's still a threat on him from the Iranians, him, Pompeo, and others. So I think you're right in your assessment that they want to get rid of him. And I think he's just going to have to keep moving the way he's been moving to stay safe, to stay alive, and to keep it going forward. But no question, the deep state is scared. The deep state is losing power, and they're going to do what they can to hold on to power. I think the real questions become, like Trump says, it's too big to rig. I think we've reached a point where too many people are now saying things that were once considered fringe. Too many people are the tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy crazies that the left talks about. And now that that's out there, it's difficult for them to pull the wool over your eyes. It just is. Wayne, thanks for the call. Big shout out to everybody in Idaho. KBFI in the building. I want to continue straight ahead. Your calls and more. 833-482-5337.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now. 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Best head of hair in live late night radio 6 years in a row. It's Rich Valdez.
He goes through 6 days of preparation at Camp David.
More than that.
And they know the rules.
It was more than a week.
Okay, so more than a week. They know the rules. He practices with the mics. He knows every one of these questions is coming. And yet he couldn't fill the time. Now, I just want to, let's see what the White House is saying. Sources close to the White House are saying he had a cold, wasn't feeling well. I mean, as you would expect, that came out early on in the debate. But what accounts for someone with so much experience doing so much preparation and this being the outcome?
Honestly, I think the question answers itself. He wasn't capable of doing any better than he did.
That is Aaron Burnett from CNN having a conversation with Chris Wallace. And what's interesting is she says he had the questions. I think that one slipped out of the bag. Now, again, I don't know if she was saying he had the actual questions or he knew which questions they'd be asking, because you can anticipate what they're going to ask you when you're president. Of course, you look at the polls, you know the issues. But the comment from Chris Wallace, I think, is also telling, where he says, clearly he wasn't capable of doing any better. This is a man with a track record of success, according to them. And I say that this is a man of a track record of getting over, like many in politics. All right, on either side of the aisle. That's just the reality of what happens when you don't have term limits. But I want to get your thoughts on this. 8334 Valdez. Let's go to Patty, Ventura, California, KVTA. Patty, go right ahead.
Hi. You know, here's what I know. Biden's got sundowner syndrome. Now, that can happen with Alzheimer's patients or Parkinson's. My husband had Parkinson's for 14 years before he passed.
Sorry.
And it doesn't matter. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I hear you fine.
It's okay. You know, he suffered long enough, and he was in like stage 5 during COVID when he passed. Biden has the Parkinson's mask. Obviously, people can say, oh, they didn't do his makeup right or whatever, but no, you can't fake it no matter how much makeup you put on. That man, and I think it's senior abuse at this point, if they grilled him for a week before this debate and he still did this poorly, he's got sundowner syndrome. He's got probably stage 3, 4 at the least of Parkinson's disease, where you get the sundowner syndrome and cognitive dysfunction. I'm not a doctor, but I lived with a man who died with Parkinson's disease, and I did see a tape from Jesse Waters where Jill gets up on the stage and helps Biden walk down the steps.
Yeah, I saw that too, Patty. And, you know, I appreciate what you're saying because, you know, and I really do appreciate it. I'll tell you, I also was a caregiver to my dad for a number of years. My dad had traumatic brain injury related dementia, and he also had sundown syndrome, and it was quite a thing to watch. It was very severe for my dad, oftentimes becoming violent. You know, he'd be like, what are you doing in my house? As soon as the sun would go down, or at 5, 6 o'clock, right away, he'd be like, who are you? What are you doing in my house? He became very belligerent, and it always happened around the same time of day, so you could expect it coming. And I feel like part of that is what you're describing. When we saw Biden, he was very lost in that part of the day. I think when we see him a little bit more fiery, it's during the morning hours of the day, or, you know, 10 a.m. when he's had a chance to really wake up. And again, this is all speculation. None of us are medical professionals that can make that determination, just caregivers who've seen these symptoms in other people. But very interesting, to say the least, that is the case. And I feel badly for him. I would want, you know, if that were me, my family members, anybody else, to get them the care they need and not try to hold on to power because you don't like Trump and you think that, you know, it's a threat to democracy and whatever. So I'm with you. I think it's elder abuse and it's a terrible thing. And I hope he doesn't have Parkinson's. I hope he doesn't have a lot of things. I hope he gets better, retires, and enjoys his life. Just get out of the White House, right? Patty, Ventura, California, KVTA, thank you for the call. Let me see. Do we do? Yes, we do. We go to Justin, Lake County, Minnesota, WDAY. Go right ahead, my man.
Yeah, Justin from Lakes Country, AM 970 Fargo.
Woo!
But yeah, good to talk to you.
My brother.
Good to
What's
talk
up,
to you again,
my man?
friend. Hey, couple things. Well, on that last note too, I was just thinking a funny thing, if you can find any humor in that, is just that, yeah, I'm sure the next debate then they're going to ask for, among other things, their demands are going to be, let's have it at 12 p.m. around lunch, so he's fresh. But no, I had a comment and a question for you. So the comment is, you know, a lot of these Democrats over the past few days that have calmed down have said, poor, more or less poor Joe, he's doing the best he can, et cetera. You heard Bill Maher from Friday nights talk about, gosh, now I have nobody to vote for. And I thought about it over the weekend. I don't feel sorry for these guys one bit, because they've done this twice now to us, where they chose to do this with their nominee. We didn't choose this. They chose not to have primaries, not to get RFK involved, not to get any of these others and do it like a normal process like the Republicans have done and traditionally Democrats in the past. They also did that in 2016, right? They, obviously gave the cold shoulder to Bernie Sanders. I'm not saying that I wanted Bernie, but the point is they've done this to themselves and they have nobody to blame but themselves.
Yeah.
And I'd love your thought on that. But then the question I had for you was, okay, now that this has taken place and it's been, some weeks since we spoke, what do you think about the Trump jail possibility now, which is coming up next Thursday? And the reason I ask that is because I think that Judge Merchan has a lot of pressure on him more than previously now, because they realize that, at the minimum, Joe's not going to win. And, maybe there's a candidate switch out like what you were talking about before, or maybe not. But the point is, it's looking downhill. We got to get this guy out of the field. And, just jail seems to be more and more like a possibility. I'd love your input on that.
Well, Justin, always good to hear your voice. I think you're right. I think that the pressure is going to be on because that's the most viable state count that they have against him, right? It's not a Department of Justice case, even though they're trying to federalize that statute at the city level. This is the one where they could try to embarrass him, try to put him in Rikers Island, try to do a lot of things. This is the case that did not happen while he was president, right? So I think all of these things combined here, this becomes, all right, let's give it everything we've got to try and embarrass Donald Trump, convicted felon, to try to brand him as that again, because everything else is going to come falling apart in light of what we saw coming out of SCOTUS today. Whether it happens now or it happens a little bit later, it eventually will all come falling apart. Even this case, I think, will get turned on appeal. So I think if they can get it into the media that this is what we're doing, I think that is a big win for the Democrats. The question is whether they're able to pull it off, and it's going to backfire, right? Trump's going to gain steam from it. It's going to be full speed ahead with the fundraising, and ultimately I think it just propels him into the White House, that they haven't figured that out yet. Folks, I appreciate the call from WDAY. Big shout out to Justin and Jay and the team at WDAY. They do a great job there. We're coming right back. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Lots of opinions, lots of people weighing in. We got Dan in Pittsburgh on KDKA, Helen in Pittsburgh, KDKA, Diane in Chicago, WGN, Jane in Saratoga, New York, WDGJ, and Mark in Bozeman, Montana on KMMS. Mark, go right ahead.
Hi. I was wondering if this was part of a Democratic plan, Biden's performance in the debate. I heard a lot of people talking about him getting doped up before the debate, but I was wondering if maybe they put him on downers in maybe an effort to replace him, because I'm hearing a lot about that online. And then also, you're talking about that Arabella fund. I hear Zuckerberg and I hear Soros, and I'm wondering if those guys, maybe they don't like that Biden is Catholic and they want to get, somebody else in.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if the Catholics even think Biden is Catholic, number one. Number two, I think you're right. They might be doping Biden, but is it going to work? Will they have enough time? Only time will tell. We'll know soon enough. Mark and Bozeman, thanks for the call. KMMS in the building. Everybody else on hold, sorry about that. I'll get to you tomorrow. First thing, I'm Rich Valdez. Hasta la próxima.